we're gonna have fun and we're gonna get into focus here on the new work.
Oh,
So before we do that, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
thank you. My
Yeah.
God.
Where are you located?
I'm in Ossining, New York. It's a suburb of the city, about
Okay.
30 miles north.
Okay. Excellent. So it's there, you got a little bit of quiet there.
I have a lot of quiet. I live on the Hudson River,
Okay.
not right on it. I'm not like the wealthy people, but very
Okay.
close.
Right, right. Well, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, the middle of America, one of the jazz cradles. So, um, I want to begin our conversation with if you look at the calendar right now, I'm sure it's PTSD for a lot of people, especially artists. But we're looking at March. 4 years ago, the world stopped. How did you survive the pandemic and how did it change you?
The pandemic was, of course, at a time where I had 4 shows opening for Aaron Neville. And I was going to be opening for Lisa Loeb in a local theater that had been looking for me for a while. And they thought, oh, this was a good way to get you to do more shows. So those shows went out the window. And I remember 2 weeks in when I realized this wasn't the little respite. I thought, oh, we get a couple of weeks off. I can catch up. When I realized, I remember that we're going to be in the house a long time, and I was pretty depressed. Um, but I learned so many things. I had more time to work on Logic, and Joe Locke was doing a project with Raul Midon, and he asked me to sing on it, and that was one of the first things I did for myself in Logic. I recorded my own vocals. I need to remind people that that's out there. It's a great. We did this. I've done a lot of Bob Dylan tunes. I get asked to do a lot of Bob Dylan tunes, so that was all along the Watchtower with Joe Locke on vibes and Raul and some other great players. I'll try to send it to you if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always am blown away by that movie that they made of Bob Dylan, and the woman that played him. Did you see that
Oh,
one?
I didn't see it, but I know about it.
There were so many fun lines in there. I remember at one point, it was like Bob was having these fever dreams to try to figure out where he was going to find this wellspring of creativity in him. And at one point, he was in an old house, and there was a maid in there, and she just turned around and said, "Why don't you stop concentrating so hard on what you want to write about and just look at everything around you?" And it was like this revelatory moment of him just looking in the mirror instead of trying to be a swami looking into a
Yeah.
glass bulb. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's fascinating. So let me ask you this. Does it feel refreshing? Is there a level of renewal of having an album coming out right now?
Well, absolutely. I didn't make an album because I wanted to make money. So I accepted that. Um, and this album really was made because I started a second band, and there's a time when a band really like hits its stride. And I experienced that with my other band that I've had since '97. But I started doing these early sets at the 55 bar. And suddenly when Nikki, who plays piano, when she came back, and Eric Halverson, who's a really expressive drummer, I feel like in this band I'm often singing with him and the whole band. So once we had a sound, I had done these live shows, and I said, oh, I called it the Love Stream, and we'll put these shows out. People supported it, blah, blah, blah. But the band, they were like, it's not good enough. The sound isn't good enough. We'll even we'll pay to go into the studio and do it right. Nobody had ever said that. No band. And I'm not that I thought like the New York unit should. Um, so we went into Samurai Studios, and that was great. I had a little bit of a cold, so some of the vocals I had to recut a little bit, but I kept some of the real. A lot of the real is still in there. And then started the deluge of copywriting, everything that it takes. And truth, I don't know if the audience would be interested that It's going to be 837 days from the day I walked into the studio till March 29th, when my 11th album will come out.
Wow. That's wild. I mean, usually people are on year clips. That's quite a while.
Yeah. So, throughout my career, in the beginning, I would make records, and I came off the road at age 29. And then I worked for Dan and Yogurt as an analyst. And I started playing in New York. I started a residency in 97 at the 55 bar. So I played a lot. And why did I tell you that? I lost my train of thought there,
No,
but
you're fine. Did you like that though? Did you like splitting the zygote and having those two lives, or was it too much?
after spending 7 years on the road, and literally 51 weeks a year, I was all over the place, from Egypt to Austria, Germany, Italy. I was lowered out of helicopters in the Indian Ocean playing for the USO. I mean, my 20s were unmatchable in terms of adventure. So having a steady job and a paycheck, I used to call it the prize. And everybody was, like, complaining. And I started my job wearing my mother's clothes. I had no, like, I had only, like, I had a big shock of hair, like I was in Flock of Seagulls. And it was a great transition, learning what were the audiences that I was meeting? What were they doing in the daytime? And it's a little scary, but it was definitely fun.
Yeah.
I love people and observing the world.
Yeah. That would be coming down off quite an adrenaline high based on what you said. I mean, to travel the world and to be, an entertainer and to do all of that, and then to get into the civilian ranks to kind of come down would have to be quite I don't know what you would call that, if that would be jet lag or what, but that would be wild.
Right. I was just turning 30. And at 40, I went back to full-time musician, being a
Right
full-time.
on. Yeah.
And I learned so much, my love of numbers and Excel, and I made a lot of friends. And Dannon was a great company. When I put out my fourth CD, they bought it for the whole sales team. So, I mean, I've had a lot of goodwill, being a musician. And of course, I've had people try to take stuff and weird things. But, when I read what's happened to many, many big artists, I would say that I've sailed through, because luckily my goal was to play music.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So let me ask you this. On this new album, you've been pretty clear about your intentions, the evening news. What are you hoping ultimately the listener gets from this album?
um, without being like, this is my post-pandemic album, I am talking about freedom, because I think it's important right now. We throw the word around, but we don't always know what that means. And a lot of the songs deal with the concept of freedom. Blackbird, it's Paul McCartney. And that was his response. He has several different reasons for writing the song, but it was his response to the civil rights movements in the 60s. I was growing up then, and I got to stay up to see the Beatles. Beatles have meant a lot to me. So there's two Beatle covers on there. And then there's a song called Esmeralda, and we just
Yeah.
put out a really nice video for Esmeralda. And I guess Esmeralda is about the value of relationships, like not just love relationships, people who, broke your heart, but someone who kind of helped me to leave college, because I left college and went on the road for those 7 years. And when I was 40, I left my day job of 18 years and my 401k and my corner office and my spreadsheets, and said, I'm only going out if I'm going to do my own music. And that's what I did. And once again, I started touring in Italy. I went to Nepal, a bunch of places. And I was very, very fortunate, never becoming, a household name, except for the places I played, like St. Bart's.
Yeah.
For 16 years. I would spend a month in St. Bart's. I played for local people. Billy Joel sat and watched me one night. A couple of TV stars. I'm trying to think of her name, but yeah, it was really cool. Same, and I always traveled with the same band.
Yeah.
Just as the evening, when I say the evening news, it's Adam, Eric Halverson, Adam Armstrong, who was co-producing, and just a great guy from Australia. Adam, Eric, Nikki Denner, who appeared on my 10th album, and a young guitar player who's been playing with me about 9 years, Mark McIntyre. And he wasn't even a part of the band. He was part of the New York unit, but he plays in both bands. He's getting popular. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep him playing with me because he's becoming quite the young star. But that's how that's what I did. It's like I did the same thing. I left college and went on the road. I left a day job and started playing my own music. And now I sort of have two working bands. And the people, if Ray Levier, who's been with me all those years, great drummer, posts every day on Instagram. If he can't do the gig, Eric does the gig. If Eric can't do the gig, Ray does it. So they come in and out. The bands are slightly different, but I don't know how important that is to a listener. It's important to me. So
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. So how did all of this begin? Take me back to where you were born and raised, your childhood, early influences. How did this love of music become your life?
I was born in Brooklyn. My parents came from Grenada in the 1950s. I was the first American born. So I'm an English speaking American born to immigrants. So I'm a first generation, that's the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh I loved I loved songs. The first song I loved was the Christmas tune by the Chipmunks. And on the backside, on the flip side, was a song called Almost Good. And it was kind of a boogie woogie piano thing. And I remember dancing a dance. It was like at 4, it was almost, or 3, it was almost like the Charleston. I would do this little dance and I was hooked. My parents from Grenada, my mom's side of the family, a lot of musicians. My grandmother played the piano, taught the piano. My uncle, Bill Monroe, wrote a song called When My Baby Smiles at Me, and that was on Broadway. And they were all musicians, and most of them emigrated to Canada. My grandmother stayed in Grenada. When I was 10, I got a guitar that my brother cast aside. I tuned it up so it would make a sound. Teacher had died, and I was an intense kid, and I'm a childish uh, adult. That the idea that I saw this teacher on Friday and on Monday he was gone. That was the first subject of a song. My brother saw me playing the guitar and said, "Oh, she needs to learn." He put the other strings on, and I lost the song for life. So anytime he's mean to me, I tell that story. I told that once at the bottom line. I thought he was going to shrink out of the room, but
What was the first live show you ever saw with your own eyes that really blew you away?
that blew me away. I mean, had to be. There was James Taylor and Joni Mitchell. I started seeing them. Those singer songwriters really captured me. The first show I saw though was Count Basie with my parents, and I remember them putting cotton in my ears, and it seemed kind of scary. Um, yeah, the singer songwriters got me playing. I think that James Taylor and Joni Mitchell taught me to play guitar. They had both had books. They had tablature, and Joni had all the tunings. So by the time I was 18, I was writing some of my own stuff and playing a lot of Jackson Brown and James Taylor and Carole
Yeah.
King.
That's wild. James Taylor was the first person that the Beatles signed when they opened up Apple Music. It's wild.
I
Yeah.
didn't even realize that until much later because I was a big Beatles fan and
Yeah.
I had that first album on Apple Records, but I wasn't thinking,
Yeah.
record labels and
Yeah, of course
um,
not. Yeah. You know what's interesting? I'm a huge Beatles fan myself, and when you mentioned them and seeing them on TV, I'm reading a book by James Kaplan, and it's about the construction of Kind of Blue. And he really splits up all of the main players. He goes into Miles's life, he goes into Bill Evans, and then he goes into Coltrane. And it's towards the end of the book, and I'm reading about Coltrane, and it was after, he really, really got big before he got sick, and they talked about the night that the Beatles played and what a seismic shift in jazz that was. How the
Mm,
consciousness of everybody, the youth, went to rock and roll like that. And it's
right.
weird because I've always wondered when that moment was, because that was after, that was probably about the mid to late 60s. And it's just weird to think, because I always wondered, I'm hopeful that jazz becomes a popular music again and becomes something that can just be on every radio, but that's a pipe dream. But I just wonder
Yeah.
where that seismic shift was, and probably between Elvis and the Beatles and all of that, it was like everything just kind of shifted away from Miles and bebop and the cats that were putting it out early on.
Yeah, I have, I didn't go to music school, though almost everybody that I work with went to Berkeley or, some impressive schools.
Yeah,
But I think what the Beatles had was something that you can't teach.
no,
And they were absolutely borrowing from their sources, but when they did it, it came out differently. Um, but they had a harmonic sense. And I think that there are things that go on internally that we don't even understand. Why does a certain song stop you in your tracks or make you want to cry or, make you want to party? We still haven't nailed down, and there are people that can tell you, well, if you're going to move from the dominant seventh back to the root, and, I never looked at it that way.
yeah,
But I noticed, even with my own writing, musicians, whenever it was time to chart something, or there was always an assumption uh, that was like, no, no, this is, I, I think my ears were maybe structured by them.
yeah,
And not also, we never talk about television and commercials, TV theme songs,
yeah,
commercials. There
yeah.
was a show called Courtship of Eddie's Father. And I think Paul Williams wrote the theme. And some friends of mine we were all just singing TV theme songs. All of these things come together to sort of create an invisible culture. And I hope I've always tried to draw from that culture, from those different feelings. And even though I can't define it, I I'm reaching, I'm reaching sometimes for the juxtaposition. Take this section and put it next to that section, and that movement either lifts me or brings me down.
The fascinating thing about the human mind is that even when we're not consciously honed in on it, subconsciously, all of these jingles and all of these things are just ruminating back there. They become a
Mm-hmm.
part of dreamland, and then they become a part of a chart. It's like all of it's active in one way or another, whether we're conscious of it or not. You know,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's
So,
wild.
and so coming back to the evening news is about freedom. It's about struggle because I'm struggling. We're all struggling with what we learned, what we liked about not having to decide what show I was going to see. And I liked being home. I learned a lot of things, and getting back out, but being that much older has also been like, wow, well, what am I going to do now? But, in the history of music, there have been many, many people who, at the end of their lives, um, made some contributions. And it's my, how do I say this? From the time I was a child, I was an old person. I
Yeah,
think I'm arriving at where when a 4-year-old talks to you like this, you're kind of like, oh, when you're almost 66, it's more acceptable. So I feel like I'm coming into my own. It's an album that's happy and sad, that talks to my mom. Postcard from Paris is really a conversation with my mom, whom I lost. And Observations. It's just a lot of observation about friendship and some songs I love. And we did On the Street Where You Live, just a swinging tune to let the band do what they do so well. That was the hardest one to place. So finding the order of the album was one of my biggest challenges. And I waited until I had that right order. And there was a change that came in the fall, starting with the Beatles, my tune Esmeralda, and then going to I was Sorry with the Fringe on top.
Yeah.
That actually is one of my favorite tunes. When we first left the studio, I used to listen to that when I would go to bed to it. Like it, that was my let's calm fuck down.
Yeah. Yeah. I dig it. I dig it.
And so the album is not my most electrifying, maybe, but the playing is more intense, the subjects are intense. And then we used to call this the jazz project, and that can have a hit or miss effect because well, it's not jazz, and I don't listen to jazz, and what kind of jazz? And I changed the name of the album and the band to the Evening News. And the Evening News, a good evening news is balanced
Yeah.
with
It should be.
should be
Yeah.
right.
Definitely. So you've been at this for a long, long time. What is the thrill that continues to make you make this music, to love what you do, and to keeping on?
I was lucky enough to discover that feeling of when I'm making the music that I hear in my head, and then playing with the people that I play with, all of them, both bands. These people can then take my changes, which are very important to me, and open them up. It's like adding color to what I've already arranged. I can't tell you what that feels like. It doesn't matter who's playing it. Even hearing some kids once were organized to sing one of my songs to me. And when I could hear the song structure within them just singing, it's like, it's kind of that was there from the time I played that first record,
Yeah.
you know, when you
Yeah.
love something. I love it.
Yeah.
So
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
that's a great question. Hmm. Who am I? I am steadfast. I just don't give up. I don't expect everything to work out. Um, and my biggest flaw is my love of people and beauty. Beautiful music, coincidences, and when I get sad, and I'm sad about so much that's going on in the world. Never mind the politics even of this country, but that there are people all over the world facing famine, losing their homes. When I did several tours in Cairo, and I did master classes where I met people who are like, oh yeah, I play bass and I'm interested in doing post production, and I lived in Syria. Like these people had to leave their jobs in countries and start again. When you meet a guy and you hear him play bass and realize like what he went through just to be able to do that, um, that that moves me.
Yeah.
And um, I'm a little shy, and I don't like saying like, look at all the good deeds I did. I feel like the whole world, it's not our fault, but this culture is like the whole world is like, hey mom, look at me, look at me. I raised money, I saved it. That's not me.
Yeah.
And so
Let me ask you this. Of all of the places that you've traveled to throughout your career and your life, What was one of the most unexpectedly magical, beautiful places you've been to?
Wow, wow, wow. Well, absolutely St. Bart's
Yeah.
um brought me home and to my love of the Caribbean and the water that I saw as a child. I do adore that. Um Korea, South Korea, and being there during there was still a curfew and understanding I played the it's not the 49th parallel. There's a parallel between North and South Korea, and that was truly educational,
Yeah.
like how petty the world could be
Yeah.
and with people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So,
great. I love that. So, KJ, let's get to the good business here. Album, live shows, all of the good stuff. Where can people get it and see you and indulge?
the album is going to be on all the streaming platforms, even ones I'm learning these names. I saw Craig Ferguson. He's going, "Don't put this on your tiki-taki and your D." I feel, yeah, it's Amazon, Apple, etc. Um, I play in the New York metropolitan area. As far as Connecticut, I have a great show at a place called Uncle Chief. That's where we're having a CD release if you're in New York. Um, if the album does great, maybe we'll go out and we will tour again. Maybe the folks that invited me to Umbria Jazz 11 times will realize, oh, she's still doing it.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever. I'm open to whatever happens. I think I have 34 shows between now and August. KJDenhert.com. You can hear the record. And we're out. We play. I have a residency in Manhattan at Arthur's and Brooklyn at Sonny's. Each band has a different residency. And then gigs. I'll be in Branford, Connecticut, Jazz on the Green. I have, it's really fun stuff
Yeah, for
when you
sure.
take all the rest out.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. KJ, you're a delight. Thank you so much for your story, for your time. Best of luck with the new album and everything that comes your way. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Great questions. And what's the name of the book you're reading?
Oh, it's called Three Shades of Blue. In fact, I have it right here. Um, it's hopefully it gets weird with the backdrop, but
Yeah, that's
it's
cool.
yeah, but it's James Kaplan. It's fascinating, man. I mean, it just really he fetched an interview with him early on in life when he didn't really know jazz. So he goes to meet Miles Davis of all people. Talk
Oh,
about
wow.
being baptized by fire. So it just really kind of unfolds from there. And there's interviews with Sonny Rollins and all these cats. And it really just kind of gets into the like how this album came about, how the musicians all kind of came from their separate orbits and came in on that magical 2 day session and how it became the iconic sound of the jazz soundtrack sound. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I can't even believe I know some of those musicians now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew some of them. I've jammed with. It's like what? Because I didn't know who anybody was. So
Yeah. It's wild, man, especially with that session and all those guys. It's like they are like the top of the top and it's wild. Yeah. I did interview Jimmy Cobb at one point and
that's who I played with.
I was marveled at how calm he was. He was
Yeah,
just like, I will never forget the quote he said. He said, all we did is we played our butts off and we just wanted to see what was going to happen. And now he was like, it's weird that it's this thing. And it was just, and Jimmy's just that kind of cat. He's just very grounded. And so are the jazz elders. The jazz elders remind me of all, like in Empire Strikes Back. They're the guys in Cloud City. They
yeah.
are the masterminds orchestrating for us minions. And they just have this calm. They change the particles when they walk in the room. They just have this way about them that is above and beyond our regular conception as people. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, some of those guys are gone, but I want to mention someone who really, really helped me, one of these jazz elders, and that is Dr. Lonnie Smith. Because I didn't know his work. And we're having breakfast together. And I noticed our keyboard player was acting weird at breakfast. So I'm like, what's the matter with Bennett? And me and Lonnie Smith were just having a ball, which is, that's been part of my gift sometimes to be the neophyte.
Yeah.
And He was a great supporter, and I learned a lot from him. And when he came to see me at Smoke, you know, I I was just so grateful. Smoke is a club in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've had a lot of moments with people, legends, but Dr. Lonnie did something to me. I had never been around that kind of human. Like
Yes.
I remember getting off the phone and I was like, oh my God, like there's another level of consciousness on this planet that's full of kindness and humility and absolute talent. I mean, that guy, the only other moment that I remember, I talked to the late great Dr. Randy Weston,
Mm.
and he said something to me that to this day brings the hair up on my neck. He was explaining his pilgrimages to Africa and how the meeting of America and Africa became the jazz that we know. And he said, Joe, what you got to understand is everything in Africa swings. The elephant tails, the palms in the tree,
Oh.
every single thing swings. So it's a natural reaction when you have a music that does that. It mimics the environment. And I was just like, all the whole curtain just opened for me. I finally got it.
Mm.
And just the way his eloquence too, being an elder, being a legend, the depth of their character was just unreal. So anyway, it was great.
I'm ever in Kansas City or you're in New York, please let's have dinner. I would love
Oh,
to talk with you. I'll talk your ear off. But
yeah, I love it. Me too. I love to talk. So this has been delightful. Before you